Hi guys, this is Kayla.
And this is Becky, and we're with A Couple of Bees Read.
And today we have with us Drew Kizer. He's one of my good writing buddies and also the author of Burdens, a collection of short stories that I've read and reviewed here. So today, Drew is giving us the honor of interviewing him about this book and some other work he's working on, right? So
yeah, we might get into that.
Maybe. There's something I've been reading of yours that I still haven't read the ending yet, and you got me in suspense for a few months now. But let's see. First question. I would like to know about the journey you had for becoming an author. When did you start writing? How has your writing changed over the years?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to write since I was a kid. My mom always brought home good books from used bookstores, and if Walmart had like 50-cent paperbacks, I remember her bringing those home. Just anything she could get her hands on, she'd take us to the library. And I always was interested in becoming a writer, but I never could really figure out how to write fiction. So I got into ministry very young. Started out as a youth minister and then started doing pulpit ministry. And of course, had to do a lot of writing of lessons and sermons. So my first books were just Bible study books, little short 13-chapter books that people could use for classes or personal devotion or whatever. And I wrote 9 or 10 of those, but I always wanted to do fiction. That's really where my heart was. And I didn't really want to write Christian fiction or, things like that. I just wanted to write stories about people and characters like the books that I grew up reading. So, honestly, I hate to put it this way, but if it wasn't for the pandemic, I probably would have never got started. But it slowed my schedule down to where I had time to develop that skill. And I just sat down one day and just made myself do it. And my goal was just to get 4,000 words. And I remember it was so hard to crunch out, those 4,000 words. I'd do it maybe 600 words at a time. And it was excruciating, but I just kept going scene by scene, just trying to get it in. And when I finished it, I thought, well, I have an idea for another one. And soon I started learning how to piece these scenes together and get more ideas. And the pandemic gave me enough time to practice and get involved in it and get a routine going. And soon I got to where I felt like I could actually put something out there. So that's kind of my journey. And I haven't left the Christian writing totally behind, but I'd really rather do more fiction going forward with the rest of my life.
That's good. So how do you come up with your ideas about, what you're going to write and from like start to finish? How does that work for you?
It always seems to start with an image.
Yes.
I don't really start with the story. I start with the image. And I've learned to trust those images. I feel like, and whether this is actually true or not, it works for me. I feel like those images are symbols of something in the subconscious, and that if I can just unravel it a little bit, a story is going to come out of it. So one of my stories in the Burdens book is about a prophet leading a cow to a sacrificial ground, and he's got this journey to make over hills, and that just started out in my mind of a picture of this man in a robe leading a cow by rope through the wilderness. I just saw that in my mind and fleshed it out. Sometimes I have dreams that I write down and spin out into stories. It always seems to start with an image, though. And I remember when I was young and I was trying to learn how to write fiction, I would try to come up with ideas, and all I could do was just write an image down on a piece of paper, and then I couldn't turn it into a plot.
Mhm.
And so what I was able to do as I got older and read more and kind of thought about, well, what are these authors doing? I learned how to spin those images out into stories. A filmmaker that's very important to me is a Russian filmmaker, Andrei Tarkovsky, who does a lot of art films that are really slow and boring to people. But I've read some of his biographies and some of his statements on art, and he says, trust those images that you have in your dreams or in your imagination, and he trusts them so much that he'll put them on the screen, not even knowing what they mean himself. Now, I don't go that far, but I do think that's a very important concept. Is if you've got an image in your mind that's very compelling, you can trust that that's coming from somewhere deep inside of you, and it may have meaning, and you won't know until you try to work with it a little bit.
Oh, that's very interesting. And we know some very popular authors out there who had a dream and turned it into a whole series, and so that's great. Yeah.
You mentioned finding time to do this during COVID. So since that time, I know time management has been a struggle for me. What is your schedule like, and how do you manage to find time to write?
It's so hard. And Kayla, I know you're super busy. You got a family. I'm in the same situation. I have 2 kids. My wife is very busy. She's a professional counselor. She has her own practice, and I'm still doing ministry work, and that's very busy. So, the novel that I've been working on, the only way I could get it done is to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and try to get some stuff out before the kids wake up. And once they get up, it's all over. We're trying to get them to school and get all the things done and then get to work. So most of the first draft of the novel that I'm working on now was done in those early hours of the morning. I'm not doing that now that I'm kind of in an editing mode. I just find time here and there to work on it. And my work allows me a very flexible schedule. So, there's time here and there. I learned something from a professor, one of my professors at college. He taught me this phrase, little and often. And I think that's a really good way to get things done, is not to ignore those 20-minute time frames, not to just eat those up with social media, but say, hey, I could do a little editing in this 20-minute time frame, or I could write 150 words.
Mm-hmm.
I could read over something, or I could work on somebody else's work. I could do something related to writing, even if I only have 15 minutes here. And if I didn't do that, now that everything's back up and running, I would never get any writing done.
Right.
And I'm not getting up at 5 every morning right now. I have to be really fired up about an idea to do that. So it's hard to get up at 5 to edit. But when I get excited about another idea, I'll be able to do that again, because that's when I was really getting work done.
That's good.
So we talked a little about the group we're in. So how do you build a writing community, and what is a writing organization that you might be a part of it, and how has that helped you grow as an author?
Yeah, well, I met you, Kayla, through the Birmingham Writers Workshop, which has been phenomenal. It's been such a confidence booster for me. I was really nervous going in because I'd never done anything like that before. But I'd written this stuff and I hadn't bounced it off of anyone. So I knew I needed to know if there was anything there. And you and the other writers in that group have been so encouraging. I feel like it's really good because the director tells us, in those critiques, you start off with things you like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always going to be encouraging because everybody's trying to find something positive to say. And it's always been substantive in my view, in my experience. They're not just going to give you empty praise. And then they'll give you some constructive criticism, and everybody is critiquing one another. So they're being nice, and there's nice people involved. And that's been a great way to meet people. And I encourage people who are aspiring writers in my area to sign up for this and be a part of it, because we don't have that many writers involved. And I have a hard time getting people to join. They're so afraid. But if I could encourage somebody to do something to help their writing, it would be find a critique group, get involved. You'll meet some great people, and it's a safe space. And you have to be brave enough to be criticized, or you can't become a better writer. Another thing that I've done is I find people trying to do what I'm trying to do and send them my work and offer to read their work and give feedback. I try to do reviews on people's stuff, whether it's the Amazon review or a Goodreads review. And I've made some relationships with some writers that way. Get ready to be ignored a lot when you do that kind of thing. If you're sending books out, get ready to waste a little money, but you don't know until you try. There may be somebody out there who's looking to get a little feedback on his work, and you could, share work that way. But I haven't built like a huge community of writers, and I haven't gone to too many conferences. I went to the Killer Nashville conference last year in August, and that was good. And I met some people. Kayla, you could probably tell us a lot more about this because you really get out there and beat the pavement. I'm impressed with your work ethic. I really am, and your networking skills.
Oh, thank you. I mostly hide behind Becky in public, honestly. I think Killer Nashville was my first time going out on my own.
Yeah. Wherever we go, I'm always saying, this is my daughter-in-law, and let me tell you what she did. And,
But I think, like you said, it's good to have support from critique groups, from critique partners, and everything to build that community, no matter how big or small it is. Now let's talk about your book, which I loved this.
Okay.
I don't know that I got to critique any of these. I think by the time I joined the group, this was in the works to be published. So I was really excited to get to read something else of yours. And each of your stories, they have a strong thematic ties. It almost reminds me of parables from the Bible because it's got the lessons woven into the text. So how do you come up with these themes, and do you work your stories around them, or do you come up with a theme first, or is it the image, then the story, then the theme? How does that work?
Maybe some people can do it well starting with the theme, but I believe that if you do that, you're going to write a really terrible story. I think the story has to come first, and it's kind of like what I was saying about the image.
Mm-hmm.
You trust that story, and you let the story be what it's going to be. And the characters, that if you created real 3-dimensional characters, you let them do what they're going to do. And then you ask, maybe, what does this mean? I think if you start out, I'm going to have this mean fill in the blank. I know I'm not speaking for everybody, but I would write a really terrible story if I did it that way. I think the reason these come out like parables, you're not the first to use that term, and I don't mind that term. The only term I wouldn't like to hear is allegory, which it's been called that before, but to me, allegory is too on the nose. I don't want it to be that much on the nose. I want it to be open-ended enough to make people ask questions and to do their own thinking, to have a subjective experience with it. So I forgot where I was going with that. We were talking about parables, but if it works out to be a parable, I was going to say the reason it comes out like that is I do a lot of thinking about spiritual concepts and right versus wrong, good versus evil. All my life, I've been in that kind of world of thinking, and so that's buried deep, and it comes out, in the stories that I want to tell. And my imagination starts with these images and these characters and these stories. And at the end of the day, the choices I've made happen to sometimes evoke some kind of moral principle, perhaps. But I want, first and foremost, them to be a good story. That's the main goal.
And they are, by the way, excellent stories. But one of the things that I found the most compelling about them is I feel like I could read one and be like, oh, well, here is the theme and the moral because that's what speaks to me. But then I could hand the story off to someone else and then come up with something completely different. But I think the characters are just so strong that they bring across meaning to everyone, because I feel like I've met people like that in my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What first story you tell in this book collection is about a shopkeeper, and he has, he values things too much, and that was the theme I took from that, is you should value people over things. Yeah. And it's so well done, because just in those first couple of really paragraphs, I feel like I know this man. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I see myself in him as well, because especially in today's time, there's that temptation to value things. Mm-hmm. And it's so well done in each of those stories. And that was really the question that popped out to me, was like, how are you doing this? Because I feel like I struggle to go back and put a theme in, and yours are just so strong and at the same time not preachy. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes me feel really good to hear you say that, because people don't like to be preached at. And I don't like the Christian fiction label, because I really don't feel like I'm writing Christian fiction, but I realize you need some kind of genre to find your audience. I'm kind of arriving at that idea late. I started writing before I thought anything about genre, and so if I've ever made a mistake, that's the mistake that I made. But the reason I want exactly what you said. I want people in their subjective experience to draw something from it. I want them to ask questions and see themselves in the various characters. And I'm happy if the story evokes anything like that. I'm not particular about what moral or truth you draw from it. Somebody's not going to tell me, well, hey, this is about materialism. And I say, no, that's not what that was about. What's wrong with you? I'll be very happy that they're working on that in their lives. And so the story spoke to them that way. I think the best kind of stories do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I would agree with that. And so tell us what you're working on now, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So I'm working on a couple things. Like Kayla said, she has been helping me with the other writers on a novel that's set in the same world that the short stories are written in. And it's been great stepping away from the stories into a long form novel, because I don't have to come up with a new set of characters and a scenario every week. So I've enjoyed working on that. I've been working on it for a long time. I've been editing it for a while. And it's basically a story about love and what the nature of love truly is. There are mothers in it who are fighting for their children. There's some supernatural stuff. I like a little magical realism in my stories.
Me too.
So, there's some things that, it can get weird sometimes. I like dream sequences. I have a lot of that in it. And it's pretty much done. I've worked through 5 drafts. Kayla, at the last workshop, I presented the conclusion.
And I wasn't there.
Michael said I could, if you and some of the others that have been working on it with me for a while come back soon, he said I can present it again. So we're saving it just in case you guys get back in another cycle here soon. So I'm anxious for you to see the last part of it.
I am too, because the last bit I read right before the conclusion, I was like, but just tell me what happens. And of course, David and everybody was like, no, that's not how this works. But I'm like, but.
Yeah, I was ready to tell you. And they were like, no, stop.
Yeah.
So I'm saving it for you. We're waiting on you to come back. And Michael has given me permission to run it back through again. Yeah. I'm also working. I decided to do some more nonfiction. I told Kayla, I think, that I've had Parkinson's disease for 12 years. And so I've had this idea for a while to write something to encourage people with chronic illness. And so this is a little memoir, a little essay, a little autobiographical. And I'm not sure, it's still taking shape, but I hope to get something, maybe a first draft, done by the end of this year. And so that's something I'm really working hard on right now, that, I'll do after the novel's done, and kind of take a break from the fiction just for a short while.
Well, I think there's would definitely be a market out there for that. I have some friends who, their husbands, I know 2 in particular, who they have, the early stages of Parkinson's, and
my uncle
and your
was
uncle
in
does
late
too.
stages
Yeah.
at this point. Yeah.
So I think that would be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I write about Parkinson's mostly because, that's my experience, but I hope it's broad enough to address people who are dealing with cancer or, any kind of disease that has no cure, or maybe they're just going through a long recovery from surgery or something. Hopefully it would be encouraging to them. And, that's what I'd really like to do next.
That sounds very inspirational, actually.
Yeah.
So that's good. I would like to read that.
Very much so, yes. So what is your best advice for other writers?
This is the one question I wrote a few things down. So first and foremost, read, and then read and read and read some more. Especially read things that you want, things in the genre that you're writing. When I started writing these stories, I read tons of Flannery O'Connor. I read a lot of Raymond Chandler. I read a lot of other, Hemingway, of course, and just a lot of short story writers that I emulated, and I, tried to see how they made magic on the page. So, I diagram things. I use spreadsheets to cut up their scenes and see what's going on. I did word counts. Mm-hmm. So read and see if you can figure out how they do what they do, and don't copy them, but just be inspired by them and see if you can learn from the masters. So read some good stuff. And I have a friend that says read bad stuff too, because then you can figure out, why doesn't it work? Mm-hmm. And that can teach you too. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize, especially in their first writing, is you need to write multiple drafts. When I was looking for a writing coach, I sent some drafts of my stories out, and this one guy, I sent it out to him, and in the file name it said the name of the story's second draft. And he said, well, the first problem I see here is that you've only written 2 drafts. I thought, well, 2 drafts. I mean, that's how many do you want? And he's like, I don't really want to see anything until 5 or 6 drafts, which blew my mind. But the reason a lot of people don't ever get anything on the page is they think it has to be perfect the first time they write it down. So in your first draft, and this isn't new with me, I think a lot of people talk about this, but just make a mess. Don't worry about perfection. That's going to be the biggest obstacle to getting anything done, is trying to write perfection the first time. Just resign yourself to the fact that you're going to have to write this over and over and over again. And each time you write it, it's going to get better. I also want to encourage people to get feedback. Be humble enough, be vulnerable enough to show your work to others. I assume most people write expecting people to read it. So you're going to have to put it out there sometime. And get somebody besides your mom to read it, because she's going to tell you it's great. Get somebody who will tell you the truth, right? And I highly recommend investing some money in a good writing coach. The greatest blessing in my writing life has been my writing coach. I found him somewhat randomly online, and we've developed a great relationship. He's been over every word of my novel. He has been a huge encouragement. He's somebody who, if it stinks, he'll tell me it stinks. But he'll stick with me, and we'll get it right, and you've got to have somebody or people in your life who will do that. And writers' workshops are great as well to do that. So get feedback. And the last thing I'll say on that is, think about what you want to do in terms of publishing after you kind of get your chops and you feel like you're starting to write some things. Start early thinking about your end game. If you want to go the traditional, there are basically 3 routes: the traditional route, or a small publisher, or self-publishing. And this is something that I didn't really do. I started writing whatever was in my head. And so I came out with some kind of obscure stuff that doesn't really fit into a genre that I can find. I've looked for comps. I can't really find things that compare with what I'm doing. And a lot of that's because I didn't think about genre from the beginning. So I've kind of, at least with the stuff like Burdens, the short story collection, it's self-published. I can't really find anybody interested in doing this. And maybe I could keep looking and eventually find somebody, but I've wanted to move on to other things. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to be okay with self-publishing. And self-publishing is great. But if you're looking for a traditional publisher, realize you need to find out who you are early on, decide what you want to write, and write in a genre that people are looking for. Don't think you're going to reinvent genre or start a new thing. There's a few people out there, I suppose, who can do that. But, I mean, let's be honest, we're probably not that person. So think about that from the beginning and know that, self-publishing is a decent route. Kayla, when we went to Killer Nashville, I was amazed at how many of the successful authors we were talking to were self-published.
Yeah.
And that really opened my eyes, because I went there thinking, I've got to find an agent, I got to find a publisher. But, I left thinking, okay, I don't want to work as hard as Kayla, because she works like a dog. She works so hard. And I think I can be satisfied with self-publishing. So that's what I've done with my last couple projects. So that's some of the advice that I would give that I wrote down over here.
Good advice.
Excellent advice.
Yeah. I just love talking to authors because I had to write down something you said because I really liked it. Is that you read the people and you see how they put the magic on the page. That.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm talking to a writer here because
everything he says is quotable, right?
Exactly, yeah, and little and often, and different things. See, I want to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid, and but there's one thing you have to do in order to be a writer. You have to write, and I've done that. So
we're gonna work on that.
We have a project coming up that.
But do you have anything else to tell us about your next plan, your career, any extra advice you want to put out there, or just talk about Burdens?
Well, you can get Burdens on Amazon. The paperback has just come out. Kayla's got the hardback copy with Dust Jacket. But if you want to save a little money, you can go on Amazon and get the paperback. It just now came out, and that's what I've got available right now. I'd really like for some more people to pick it up and try it out. And then later this year, hopefully the novel will be out. It's getting close. So I've got few people out there reading it. And, like I said, we're in the editing stages and putting the finishing touches on that. So if you like Burdens, stay tuned for the next one. I got a new title for it. I don't know if I told you. I'm calling it Out of the Thicket. So that's probably the final title, Out of the Thicket.
I love that. I'm really excited for that one too. I need the ending.
Yeah.
And I need to reread through it again because it's so well written. I in one of our critique groups, I remember comparing you to Rebecca Ross, like the author. Mm-hmm. Just that magical realism, the way you describe things, and it's also very much in Burdens. The way you describe things is beautiful. It's like going to an art museum. Mm-hmm. Like,
oh, thank you.
So well done. Yeah. And please, guys, if you're watching this, pick up Burdens. It's so good. And then when that next novel comes out, we're of course going to review it here, and hopefully you'll talk to us again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, anytime. And I'm excited about your stuff coming out. I'm counting the days.
Well, it's going to be a minute, but that's just how it came to be. But we're super excited about this. Thank you again for meeting with us.
And thanks for having me. It's been great.
Guys, make sure to pick up the book. Check the links in the video description so that you can check out more information on Drew and everything he's working on.
That's right.
Right.
Nice talking to you, Drew.
Nice talking to you.
You too.